All right, everyone, we are going to start in about a minute. We have a bunch of people signed on, so we'll start in 1 minute. And so get yourselves comfortable, and we'll see you in a minute. Okay, we're going to get started. I like to start on time, and we definitely have a bunch of people signed down already, so I'm sure people will sign on as we begin. But let's start. For those of you who are here, thank you so much for coming. For those of you who are new, thanks for joining us. This is, I believe, our 8th or 9th webinar. We have them pretty much monthly, and we have some really exciting topics that we've covered in the past that are up on our website that you can take a look after if you're interested. And we have a lot of really, really interesting topics coming up in the coming months. So I hope you'll look out for those as well. But tonight's webinar is talking about getting in our nutrients for every diet type. So I've actually had a bunch of requests for this specific topic, which is why we're here doing this. A lot of people, specifically, speaking about people who don't get so much dairy in their diet, were wondering what are some other things that I can eat to get, good amounts of calcium. Calcium's a really important nutrient that we're going to speak about, all of its functions in a few minutes. But what are some ways that we can really get these nutrients in without eating yogurt and cheese and milk, which are those, like, I guess, the most famous ways of getting those nutrients in. So tonight we're going to speak about 3 diets that have some nutrients of concern of, potentially not getting enough of if we are following those diets for any specific reason, but what are some ways that we can rectify them and make sure that we have enough stores of the nutrients that we need. So before we get started, I'll just quickly go through with you what we're going to be speaking about tonight. So we have the introduction, which I will introduce Arielle, I'll introduce myself, and then I'll introduce Michelle Park, who is our moderator for tonight. And then we will speak about a dairy-free diet, some of the nutrients of concern, which are, calcium and vitamin D, a gluten-free diet, the B vitamins, which are nutrients of concern there, and then a vegan or more vegetarian diet. And again, nutrients of concern there are iron and B12, and more so in the vegan diet. So we'll go through that. So introduction. So quickly about Arielle. Again, for those of you who have been here, I apologize for repeating this again, but for those of you who are new, Arielle is a 501c3 status nonprofit. We're a free online platform offering families healthy, simple, and affordable solutions. We also have a ton of programming that includes, tonight's webinar, which focuses on nutrition education. A lot of, family nutrition is very, very important, and very much what I believe in here at Arielle as well. So family counseling sessions is part of our programming as well. Our mission is to empower families with the nutrition education, step-by-step recipes, and budget planning to make meals healthy, easy, and affordable. And our long-term vision is to really help combat America's chronic disease crisis by making healthy food an option for every family. We're seeing so many more chronic diseases in the younger populations now, and a lot of that has to do with America's diet, unfortunately. And so we really want to try to combat that and do everything we can to let families know that healthy food is an option for everybody. No matter what your income may be, there is always an option for healthy food. So that's really what we're here to do. So a little bit about me. So as I mentioned, or I don't know if I did yet, but my name's Ariel Kestenbaum. I am a recognized registered dietitian. I am the founder of Fair Meals, and I'm really here to offer nutritional guidance, easy recipes, and empower families to eat well on a budget. I have a master's of science in nutrition and dietetics from NYU, and I'm also a mom, a wife, and I really know how difficult it can be to provide healthy meals for my family that are also convenient and affordable. So I really hope that this resource helps families from all walks of life. And then a little bit about Michelle. And by the way, Michelle, your Instagram is awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
I absolutely love your bento box ideas. I ordered, if you guys follow her, which you definitely should, I ordered a lot of those, the cookie cutters, and I'm having the best time making lunches and meals for my son now. So thank you for that inspiration.
I have to tell you, like one of the most fun things I do with those is like I'll cut out like a star from a watermelon and a mango, and I'll swap them so they have these little puzzles to play with. The cookie cutter thing is the best.
It's amazing, really, really amazing. So it's very much what I'm like a very big proponent of. So I really enjoy watching those. So a little bit about Michelle before she takes over. She is an Emmy Award-winning broadcast journalist. She's currently a correspondent on NBCLX and NBC New York, and a recurring lifestyle expert on the Drew Barrymore Show. She's the co-creator of Her Big Idea, a show about female entrepreneurs for which Michelle has won an Emmy Award and has been nominated for 6 Emmy Awards. She graduated from Stanford University with a BA in political science and an MA in media studies. So very, very extensive backgrounds. And we're very happy to have you here tonight, Michelle. Thank you so much for moderating for us. And I will let you take it away from here.
Well, so first of all, I just want to say thanks for having me. I think that the mission of Fair Meals is something that is, I like the play on words too, but honestly, it's like an important piece of the puzzle. And I do know that there are families of so many different backgrounds and budgets that it's not always easy for them to figure out how to eat and get all the nutrients in and make it fun and exciting and make it taste good. I mean, there's a lot of different variables. So I really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
But all of that being said, so I think we launch off with 2 polls. Is that right?
Yeah. So I'm going to put out all the polls now, and we'll speak about them as the webinar goes on, just because for those of you who have been here, I still cannot figure out how to get them to go at the right time. So I will be launching the polls now, all of the questions for tonight, but then we'll be speaking about the results as we get to the corresponding information. So I will give you guys a few seconds to fill them out. Well, I'll give you like a minute or two, because these are trickier questions than we've had in the past.
I think I'm going to fill this out too, Ariel.
Yeah, definitely.
I didn't get the answers to this yet.
I was just going to tell you.
Oh, it says I can't vote. Never mind.
Oh, there should be a way I can let you vote. I can figure out how to do that. I can't do it now, but there was a way to do it, so I apologize.
Now I can just pretend I got them all right. So
okay, exactly. Oop. All right, we got a lot of votes coming in. A lot of varying answers, which I like to see.
I do also want to say for everybody who's in here today, like, send the questions through the chat. I will absolutely get answered. So as I have the chat box open, so I will be seeing them as they pop up.
Yeah, so feel free to ask questions as we go along. We always have time for that, and it makes it more engaging. So definitely feel free to enter them as we go along. All right, I'm going to give everybody, we still have a few people voting, I see, but I'm going to give everybody like another 20 seconds. And then I'm going to end the poll, and we'll talk about the first 2 questions, which have to do with dairy-free diet. Very interesting answers I'm looking at right now. Okay, I'm going to end the poll here. We have a bunch of people who voted. So, okay, so the first two questions we're going to talk about now. So, which food contains calcium? So, we had a bunch of people answer salmon, and we had most people answered sardines, and sardines is the correct answer there. And I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. So I just wanted to kind of see what people knew before going into this next section. But for those of you who answered sardines, great, most of you did, but we did have a few salmon. Nobody did bread, so good, kudos to you. The next one, we had also varying amounts of answers. So a few people got it correct. Only one person got this correct. The answer was the egg yolk, but most people did broccoli. Most of you did broccoli. A few of you did egg white. This was really a trick question, but the correct answer is actually egg yolk. That's what has the vitamin D in there. And again, we will talk about that in a few minutes as we go along. So I'm going to put this down right now, and we'll go to the other two questions as we get to those sections. So, okay, so dairy-free diets rather. So some important vocabulary that I think we need to talk about before, especially for this section, is the difference between fortified and enriched. And people have these questions all the time, and people end up, kind of switching these words and interchanging them, but there's actually a difference between them. So fortifying something is adding extra nutrients to a food that's not originally found in the food. And you typically are doing this to something that's processed. But it's a good thing. Like a lot of the times we're fortifying, we fortify milk, let's say, with vitamin D. Vitamin D is not necessarily found in dairy products to begin with, but most dairy products nowadays we find fortified with vitamin D. And then enriching something is adding the original nutrient back into a processed food. So a lot of the times the processing takes out certain nutrients, but we want them back. And that's something that's like a huge positive about that food. So we want to enrich it. We want to put it back into that food. So that's the difference between fortifying and enriching something. So I just wanted to clarify that before we begin. So some nutrients of concern when following a dairy diet, and people follow dairy-free diets for a variety of reasons, right? So some people are allergic, some people are severely lactose intolerant, some people are just minorly lactose intolerant, and it's just very uncomfortable for them. And sometimes they'll have dairy, they'll take a lactate pill and it will help them, and most of the time they don't. And some people really don't like dairy. There is actually a lot of people that it's a texture thing, like especially cheese and yogurt. There's a lot of textures that just they can't tolerate. They can't tolerate the smell. There's a very heavy smell, very strong smell rather, very pungent smell to many dairy products. So there's a variety of reasons that somebody would be dairy free. So the two nutrients of concern here would be vitamin D, which is found in fortified dairy products. Like I said, we find that in milk. And vitamin D is very important for mineral absorption and strong bones, right? To prevent osteoporosis and things of that sort. Vitamin D and calcium are going to be important for both, but really vitamin D. And I know a lot of people don't have enough vitamin D, right? So many times people go to the doctor, they get their bloods done, and what comes back? Oh, you're a little low on vitamin D. It's pretty common. But I'm going to talk to you about ways that we can hopefully rectify that. Calcium is also a nutrient of concern, right? So it's found most naturally in most dairy products. And that's something that we all pretty much know for the most part. And it's very important for healthy bones. It's important for muscles and muscle contraction. It's important for nerves, and it's important for our heart and the heart muscles itself as well. So those are two things. I think we got a question. I'm not sure. I just saw something. Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm going to read it to you, Ariel. So it says,
sure.
Don't you need vitamin K to help absorb vitamin D and calcium?
No, actually. Not that I'm aware of. A, D, E, and K are fat soluble vitamins. So, yes, they are all important and they play an important role in kind of each other's absorptions. But I've never heard that vitamin K is that vitamin K is and vitamin D are very much like intertwined that way, but it's very possible that I'm wrong. But I do know that A, D, and K, as I mentioned, are our fat soluble vitamins, and they are important and play an important role in each other's absorptions. But that's new. I can look into that. That's new to me, but yes, there's a lot of biochemistry behind vitamins and minerals, and it's it's a little bit tricky, and there's a lot of, like I said, biochemistry and science behind it, but for like all intents and purposes, I guess it's just important to know that they do all play a role in each other. But I don't think it's vitamin K is, very much important in the absorption of vitamin D. But I can look into that. But thanks for that question. So the next slide. So vitamin D. So what are some, I'm going to say sources, because obviously sunlight is not a food source, but mostly food source. So what are some sources? So we get, sunlight's obviously important for vitamin D, but sunlight alone is not enough. There's obviously some downside when it comes to sunlight too, right? So there's a balance that needs to be made. Salmon is a good source of vitamin D, tuna, sardines, shrimp, cod, fortified plant milks. A lot of juices are fortified with vitamin D, right? We'll see orange juice has orange juice, grapefruit juice. A lot of that is fortified with vitamin D. Egg yolks, like the question, and supplementation. So I put supplementation there because there are a lot of these foods. First of all, a lot of people can eat these foods and still have low stores of vitamin D. It's completely normal. So if you are somebody who has a lot of this in their diet, a lot of these types of foods in their diet, and you still have low stores of vitamin D, don't think there's anything wrong with you. It's very, very normal. We do need a lot of vitamin D to kind of fill these stores. But a lot of people also who are pickier eaters, for example, don't like some of these foods that are there. And these are definitely the richer sources of vitamin D. So supplementation really just may be necessary. And as a registered dietitian, I'll recommend somebody take a supplement, but I will never tell them you go to the store, buy it, and take the supplement. I'll always say, this is what I'm recommending, but please have your doctor, go talk to your doctor and have your doctor confirm that this recommendation is right for you. So that's an important thing. Never take somebody's recommendation unless it's your doctor and go out and do it. It's always important to talk to your doctor about it. But these food sources, besides the supplementation, these food sources are rich in vitamin D, and they're definitely important to have in our diet, especially those of you who don't drink milk and are not having these dairy products that are fortified in vitamin D. And then the next one is calcium. So calcium we get in leafy greens, right? So we get, any sort of leafy green, broccoli, sardines. So sardines is what we spoke about before. So what actually has the calcium are the little bones in sardines. So they make boneless sardines that you can find. There's still some calcium in there as well, but the bones are a really, really rich source of calcium. And we can eat the bones of sardines. They're totally okay. Any fish actually that has like these soft edible bones, that's where the calcium is. So it's a great source of calcium. Sunflower seeds are a great source of calcium. Sesame seeds, chia seeds, edamame has some calcium. Sweet potatoes, oranges, butternut squash. I'm sure you're seeing a pattern here. These are these orange hue, naturally color foods. A lot of them have some sources of calcium. Almonds and figs are also a great source of calcium. So the ones I put at the top are definitely have the highest sources of calcium. But they're all really great sources of calcium and should definitely be included, especially for those of you who do follow a dairy-free diet.
So Ariel, I have a question for you.
Sure.
When you were talking about supplementation, and obviously
Mhm.
after you discuss with your doctor, are there certain types of supplements that you should be taking, or is it kind of across the board? You just pick anything off of Amazon? Like, is there a guide to this?
So it's a really good question. I'm actually not so familiar with, I would not just go off of Amazon and get anything. There is a difference between vitamin D3 and D2. And again, there's so much biochemistry behind that. And to be honest, I'm so not up to up to code and all of that. But again, that's something you should talk about your doctor. Your doctor will tell you, how many, how there's like 1,000 mg or mc or mcg, whatever the amount is for vitamin D. They'll tell you, I guess, based on what your blood levels show, or what's right for you. It is very personalized too, depending on what your levels are at. So that's one thing that can come into play. And in terms of brands, yes, there are ones. Supplements are not really FDA approved. So anybody can kind of come out and just put a supplement out on the market. So if you do speak with your doctor, I'm sure they will have brands and types that are probably more appropriate than others, or that are not a waste of time, I should say.
And then for people who are on dairy-free diets, I mean, I'm looking at all of these ingredients and it sounds like you would make for like a nice dish of some sort. Do you have a recipe to
Yes,
recommend to people?
I do. So I always put recipes in our webinars. I love showing examples. I love showing recipes. So really, like, all of these examples of foods are just things to kind of get all of your minds kind of like get jogging your memories a bit, or kind of getting your brains turning a bit to see, okay, like, we can, I can come up with some recipes. I can make a salad and include this and that. And I love adding sesame seeds to anything, right? It's just such an easy way to get some calcium in our diet. I love finding ways, like small ways, that we can do that. So on the next slide, I actually have a recipe for chia pudding. And I love chia pudding. It's such an easy thing to make. It lasts in the refrigerator for 5 to 7 days. Kids really like it because of the pudding texture it has, and it's really, really healthy. And besides for having calcium, it also has omega-3 fatty acids, which is a whole other category, a whole other nutrient that we can talk about in a webinar all by itself. But that's a nutrient that's also pretty difficult to get, especially for people who are not big fish eaters. So I love chia. It's so nutrient dense, and it's such a like delicious, easy recipe. So it's pretty easy. You can do whatever you want with it. But it's pretty much the ratio is about 2 tablespoons of chia seeds, and you put that in a half a cup of any sort of milk you want. If you want it to be dairy, you can put it in cow's milk. But otherwise, for this, for all intents and purposes, for tonight's webinar, putting in any sort of plant milk, right? So almond milk, soy milk, oat milk, anything of your choice. And that will then congeal into this pudding. And it's so delicious, and you can top it. Here I put figs, right? Just because that's also another calcium, another calcium rich food. But it's really delicious. You can top it any way you want, and it's fun. And there's so many recipes online for a delicious chia pudding. So it's a personal favorite. Okay, so the next one is a gluten-free diet. So which nutrients to prioritize and how to include them into your diet. So gluten-free diets they're funny because there's a lot of back and forth on whether anybody really needs to follow a gluten-free diet unless they really are celiac, right? Unless someone has an actual true allergy to gluten because they are celiac. Is there such thing as a gluten intolerance? And there's a lot of in the nutrition world, there's a lot of back and forth about this. But my view is, if somebody feels better not eating gluten, then they should not eat gluten, right? Some people say gluten makes them feel tired. Some people say their stomach's sensitive to it. Some people say they get eczema. And I really believe like people know their own bodies. Everyone should know their own bodies. And if people really feel that way, then, you know, you should, by all means, you should take gluten out of your diet. If somebody's taking it out for fad diet purposes, then I don't like, because they think it's healthier. I don't necessarily think that's the right thing to do. But if you really have a true allergy, if you're celiac, or you really feel like there is a sensitivity and it's just not working for you, then these are definitely reasons to take gluten out of your diet. So I just wanted to kind of preface this section with that. Also, I think we had a poll question with gluten. So, so what vitamins do thiamine and riboflavin fall under? So most of you got this correct, and they're B vitamins, right? So there's a bunch of B vitamins. We're going to be talking about them. And these B vitamins are the nutrients of concern when we're talking about gluten-free diet. And the reasons for that is because a lot of foods, gluten-containing foods, are enriched with B vitamins. So, so gluten-free is products. So products that contain gluten are usually fortified or enriched with B vitamins, right? Which we said, and a lot of the gluten-free alternatives are actually usually not. So that's why it's this nutrient of concern. But there are other ways to get many of the B vitamins, so it's not really always a concern. But because a lot of the gluten-containing foods do have B vitamins, it's definitely something that we have to think about. And it's just important to be cognizant of what other sources we can get these nutrients from, or these vitamins from. So vitamin B1, otherwise known as thiamine, is very important for energy metabolism and for a functional nervous system. B2, which is riboflavin, is for carbohydrate, fat, and protein metabolism. So it's very important for the metabolism of the macronutrients. And then niacin, which is vitamin B3, is important for energy metabolism, for, again, a functional nervous system, a digestive system, and for skin health. Then we have vitamin B9, which is folate, and that's important for cellular health and for blood health. And for anybody who's been pregnant or who has been around people that are pregnant, know folate or folic acid is very important in pregnancy in order to prevent neural tube defects. So folate's it's really important for everybody, but you'll hear a lot about that around pregnant people for that reason. Vitamin B12 is important for brain health, for blood health, and for functional digestive system. So some sources of thiamine would be, which is the vitamin B1, would be black beans, green peas, lentils, tuna, sunflower seeds. So these are all really great sources of thiamine. Riboflavin, mushrooms. Mushrooms are a really good source of riboflavin. And cooked spinach, venison, and soybeans. And everyone always asks me the question about the cooked spinach, and it's like, it's something that is so unknown, because when I was taking a biochemistry class and I learned about cooked spinach, and I asked my professor, who is like an absolute genius when it comes to anything vitamins and minerals related, and he didn't even really know the answer. So there's something about the cooked spinach that just has a richer, that just is richer in riboflavin, but the answer is so unknown. And have looked into it. I don't know the reason for that, but just know that the cooked and raw spinach does have some riboflavin, but the cooked version definitely is a richer source. Venison and also soybeans. So these are great sources of the riboflavin. Folate, so leafy greens, asparagus, lentils, beets, broccoli, also really great sources. Niacin, again, mushrooms, avocado, broccoli, tuna, salmon, and chicken. And then vitamin B12, we really find this in meat, poultry, fish, eggs, and dairy products. And when we talk about veganism, being vegan and vegetarian in the next section, we're going to see that vitamin B12 is very, very much a nutrient of concern when we talk about people who follow a vegan diet. But we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But it is something that is of concern. And if somebody is vegan, it's important for them to tell their doctors because of that. But for somebody who follows a gluten-free diet, getting those sources of foods can definitely be okay, and we'll be fine in terms of our vitamin B12 stores.
So Ariel, let's talk about, you could supplement these nutrients or you could find them in food. Like, where does the difference lie, and why is it important to actually find it in the food you're eating?
So I'm always a big proponent of finding it in the foods we're eating. And I think any dietitian or any doctor you will speak to will say the same, right? There's that phrase, food is medicine, and that really applies when it comes to any of these nutrients. We always want to try to get food sources, and so many of these food sources, excuse me, I'm just gonna have some water. So many of these food sources are so rich in these nutrients that there's really no reason to go and get supplements. Vitamin D, for example, I don't even think it's so much about the food itself. I think it's more the actual, I don't think it's so much the food itself that's not, giving us enough. I think that there's a lot of vitamin D stores that we need, and it's almost like the food's not almost enough. So that's why supplementation is sometimes needed more there. But these other vitamins, like any of the other fat soluble vitamins and pretty much any of the water soluble vitamins, we can get by food alone. And it shouldn't be a problem. And we should eat foods. First of all, like I said, food is medicine, food's delicious, and it's fun. And it's just, unless we really, really are lacking, there should be no need for supplementation. And most people, if they follow a pretty balanced, well-rounded diet, and they, every year, let's say they go get their bloods done during a physical, they'll see that their stores should be, plenty in all of these categories. And the one that may not be is vitamin D. And, to some people's surprise, or to many people's surprise, it may be fine. So, especially if we are eating a lot of those vitamin D sources, a lot of those foods that are rich in vitamin D. So, food should always be the number one go-to, right? We shouldn't, unless somebody's a really, really, really piggy eater, and there's just no way that they're eating enough of these, different types of foods that contain these different nutrients, then I would say food should be number one. Okay. Anybody else have a question here? Nope. Okay. All right. Okay. So here we have a quick quesadilla. Again, a really easy recipe. There's a ton of gluten-free options for tortillas. So it's like fun. For somebody who is following a gluten-free diet, we can use any sort of proteins we want. It's a chicken, you can use cheddar cheese, black beans, another plant-based protein, which is great. Some spinach, which has a ton of those B vitamins. Some avocado, which again has some of those B vitamins. So this is really, really, a really, really rich in B vitamin recipe. So it's, it's delicious, it's easy, and yeah. Okay. Okay, vegan and vegetarian diets. So I'm sure I'm going to get some questions here, because I think that a lot of people typically have questions when it comes to, following vegan diets. So I'm going to quickly go through this last poll question, which you all got right. So good job. Which food is considered a plant-based iron source? And lentils is the answer. So good job, everyone. Okay, so vegan and vegetarian diet. So what nutrients do we need to prioritize, and how should we include them into our diet? Okay, so there's a common misconception that vegan and vegetarian diets are too expensive or unrealistic to maintain. So that really couldn't be further from the truth. There's plenty of affordability tips to maintain a nutrient dense plant-based diet that's, as I mentioned, that's affordable. So, I think there's definitely this misconception out there. Um, and I'm really here to debunk that. So some general tips for affordability for vegans and vegetarians would be, to buy in bulk. And I talk about this in any past webinar that I've spoken about affordability. I always talk about buying in bulk. And I'm not saying we need to go out and buy everything out there in bulk, but things that we're typically eating a lot, and people that are, do follow a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet, they typically have, especially the plant-based proteins, they're typically eating a lot of those, right? So beans, something like quinoa, some of those grains, they're going to be eating nuts and seeds. They're going to be eating a lot of those. So buying those in bulk will actually just help save us money down the road. So it's definitely important. It's definitely an important affordability tip there for those who follow these diets. Choosing canned. So, I'm definitely not a big proponent of buying everything canned, but there are certain things that are good options to buy in canned, right? So tuna, salmon, right? So those who don't follow a vegan diet, or who are pescatarian or vegetarian and they eat fish. So tuna, salmon, sardines, these are obviously great canned options. Peas, carrots, sweet potatoes, corns, legumes, right? Like things like chickpeas and beans. These are all great options in can. They're all, super affordable things. They're shelf stable, so they last a long time. So these are also really great options. And frozen first. Frozen fruits and vegetables, they get this bad rep. But frozen fruits and vegetables are actually frozen at peak ripeness. So they have pretty much the same amount of nutrients and sometimes more than the fresh alternatives. So we really should be getting, frozen fruits and vegetables. They're so easy. They're generally more affordable. And they last for a long time. You can also buy like big bags of them and use them, in different recipes, and just for roasting or whatever it may be, and for smoothies and soups and sauces. So really, frozen is our friend, and we should remember that, and don't shy away from frozen. And a lot of people do. So if you do, you're not alone. But there's so much, but there's such a misconception when it comes to frozen, but frozen is should really be prioritized. Okay. So some nutrients of concern. So iron and vitamin B12. So iron is a huge concern, because when we think of iron, a lot of people think of meat, right? Red meat. Poultry has some shellfish, fish, right? So those who are pescatarian, they can have fish, and there's some iron sources in there. But for those who follow a vegan diet and don't eat any fish or any of that sort, iron can be a really big problem. And iron's important. It's important for normal growth and development. It's important for blood health, collagen production, right? For skin, hair, nail health, everything of that sort. And vitamin B12. So vitamin B12, we more see as a problem in those who follow a vegan diet, but who follow a vegan diet for years, right? Our vitamin B12 stores actually stay pretty leveled for a long time. So I think it's something like 10 plus years, somebody following a strict vegan diet, that doctors and dietitians start to worry about, their patients or their clients' vitamin B12 level. But nonetheless, there are people who follow these vegan diets for life. So it is something that we have to think about. And there are sources of foods that do have vitamin B12 that are not found in red meat and poultry and fish and eggs and dairy products. So I'm going to go through those. And some people, do eat some of those other sources, and they still need some supplementation, and that's fine. But as I mentioned before, after Michelle's question, I think it's important for us to be educated and for us to know, and be knowledgeable to know what are the food sources that we can have before running to supplementation. What is available for us to eat, and see if we can do this, without supplementation. So, that's really what I'm here to talk to you guys about. So plant-based iron sources. So we have lentils. Lentils is a great one, right? We can add it to stews, soups, salads. We can use it as, a pasta alternative. There's so much that we can do with lentils. And they're hearty. They make things hearty. They're filling. And they're really delicious. And there's there's not much flavor to lentils, so you kind of can flavor them how you want. And they're almost like meaty, right? They're like a meat alternative. So as I mentioned, it's a great alternative, or it's a great option for a plant-based iron source. Legumes, so things like beans, add to chili, soups, spreads. They make legume typed pasta alternatives. And they make, what else can we do with legumes? Add them to salads. I mean, you can do anything. You can make them into, veggie burgers with beans and things like that. And these are things that we can make ourselves. And they may sound fancy, and they may sound like they're, more expensive, but they really don't need to be. And beans are pretty affordable, a pretty affordable food, a pretty affordable ingredient, and things that we can really put together in recipes ourselves, and make affordable dishes with, lentils and legumes. These are things that are affordable and things that we can use and make affordable plant-based options. So, and they have iron, as I mentioned. Soybeans too. So in the form of whole soybeans, right? Like edamame, soy milk, tofu, all of these, derivatives of soybeans, they have also, good irons. It's a good iron source as well. Did a question come in while I was talking? I feel like I saw something come in.
I don't see anything.
Oh, no? Okay. I don't know. I thought something came in.
I realize that there's also a Q&A box. So let me read you some of these questions that we missed.
Oh, okay.
So here's one. My child really enjoys drinking milk. I think we're gonna go back to dairy-free. Is there a level where he is getting too much calcium? Is there such thing as too much calcium?
So there's no such thing as too much calcium, but it's a really, really important question, because you'll probably notice when your child's like 1 or between 1 and 2, and they're drinking milk, and their pediatrician will actually take their blood level to see if they're anemic. And that's because actually too much milk, the calcium in the milk can actually block the absorption of iron and can make somebody anemic. So there actually is too much milk, not too much calcium, but there is too much calcium. Yes, there's too much calcium because it's blocking the absorption of the iron, right? So, and then somebody can become anemic. So yes, the answer is yes, there is too much milk. Your child should not be getting more than really like 16 ounces a day of milk. You could go up to 20 if, especially if they're not eating it like any other dairy sources. But let's say they're eating, they're eating cheese and they're eating yogurt. I would really not even go above 12 ounces a day of actual milk, because they're getting calcium in those other sources. But if they're just drinking milk, you can probably go up to 20 ounces and be fine. But yes, there is definitely such thing as too much calcium. So that's a good question.
All right, the next question is, are avocados very fattening? I was eating them every day, and when I stopped, I was able to lose some weight.
So avocados are high in fat. Yes. It's a good fat. It's a healthy fat, right? There's the difference between healthy fats and non-healthy fats. Avocado is a very healthy fat. It's good for it brings up our HDL cholesterol, which is our good cholesterol. Again, that's a whole other thing we can talk about. I actually next month am planning on doing a heart health webinar. So if you're interested in coming back, you should. But yes, there is fat, right? And that fat is going to can make us gain weight. I I personally have never met anybody who's like gained hundreds of pounds from eating avocado. So do I think it's causing so much weight gain? No, but yes, you can gain weight from it. It is a fattening food. The guidelines, the USDA guidelines actually recommend a quarter of an avocado, which is like nothing. I'll usually, when I talk to clients or I'll talk to patients, I'll usually tell them to eat, a half of an avocado, right? So that's going to be like two servings from the recommended guidelines, which is fine. But it's a high calorie food. And because of the fat that's in there, but it's a healthy fat. And when we're talking about good versus bad fats, it's definitely a good one. So I don't think it's something we should eliminate completely from our diet. If you want to go down to eating a quarter of an avocado and you think that's going to help you, that's fine. You don't even think a half of an avocado is going to be so bad. But yeah, I wouldn't say go eat, 3 whole avocados every day, because you will probably gain weight from that. But that's a good question.
It does sound delicious though. I wouldn't mind eating 3 avocados a day.
Yeah, same.
One more question, which is, if I want to leave fish out of my diet, what is the best vegetable replacement for that?
If I wanted to leave fish out of my diet, what's the best? So can the person write back what nutrient exactly are they looking for? Because it's a hard question to answer, because it's kind of like apples versus oranges, right? Comparing apples to oranges. But if you're looking for, for vitamin D purposes, then we can go back to that vitamin D slide and, what are some other things that we can incorporate into our diet that has vitamin D, right? So I think that's kind of what we need to know there, because it's a hard question to answer without knowing what nutrients they're trying to get out of that.
Yeah, well, I don't see a response yet, but
Okay.
who leaves out a lot of fish? I use a lot of tofu for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, I mean, it's for protein, that's great. Yes, you're going to get the same level of protein from salmon as you are tofu. But yes, it's very nutrient dependent. So it's hard to answer that question without really knowing what are you trying to get out of that.
I will Ariel, if I see it pop up, I'll let you know.
Sure. Okay. So what are some fortified sources of B12? There actually are a ton of fortified sources of B12. And I think a lot of that is like almost newer, like in the newer nutrition world, because of this, this known fact, this known idea that people who do follow a vegan diet for years tend to be more deficient in B12. So I think like a lot of these food distributors or, whatever it may be, are doing everything they can to almost fortify these foods with B12 to ensure that this doesn't happen. Because B12 is a very important nutrient. So nutritional yeast, I know not everybody's into it. I don't know, Michelle, are you into nutritional yeast?
Yeah, we eat a lot of nutritional yeast in the form of like, we eat a lot of the hip peas, like the things that have it. I once bought a vat of it and it just smelled so weird that I couldn't get myself to use it.
That's exactly it. The smell. So it says here, it has a cheesy flavor and it's good. Like a lot of people you may see sprinkle it on popcorn, right? Because it's like kind of like a nice, like little, it gives it a little like, extra taste to the popcorn and they get that cheesy taste, but it can be intense. And there are a lot of recipes, especially some of these like more trendy recipes that are trying to use nutritional yeast now, and it's not for everyone. So I was curious what you felt about it, because it's you're either team love it or team don't love it so much. But it is a really good, it's really fortified with B12. It is a good source of B12. It can be really, really delicious. It can be added to anything, sauces, pasta dishes, like I said, popcorn. It adds a nice, like, extra depth of flavor. So it's definitely a good option. Vegan spreads, a lot of spreads, like a lot of alternatives, dairy-free, dairy-free alternatives, like for cream cheeses or sour creams or butters, a lot of them are fortified with B12 as well. The one that I am recalling on the shelves I see in the supermarket is there's a Tofuti brand, that it's, pretty newly says fortified with B12, which is why I said, I think this is a new process that a lot of these food makers are doing now, because of this, this B12 deficiency. But it's also important, in some of these vegan spreads, by the way, to check for like added sugars and some inflammatory oils. There's some things in there that we may not want. So it may not even be worth it to use those, because of some of the other additives in there that may not be so good for us. But I just wanted to let you guys know that they're there, and that this is something that you will see in some of these, alternative spreads, and milk alternatives too, right? So add to cereal, we can add milk alternatives to cereal, to oatmeal, to coffee, which a lot of people do, sauces, granola. Those are fortified with B12 as well. And we're seeing that more and more as well. And you're seeing that actually more and more like at the front, fortified with B12, not only in the back. So I think this is something that is like probably people have become a little bit more cognizant of, which is good. Because as I've mentioned, B12 is important. And we learned, if there's anything we learned tonight, is that B12 and all these B vitamins are important for different processes in our body, and different, systems that go on in our body. So, so it's definitely important. And again, it's good to check for added sugars. There are some brands that are better than others. I'm not going to discuss those brands here, but definitely, I'm definitely going to say check for added sugars. Added sugars, there's too many brands that don't have added sugars. So if there are brands that you see added sugars, and now the nutrition labels say right there how much added sugar is in there. So it's like anybody can see that, anybody can know, because obviously there are naturally occurring sugars in foods. So yes, it is important to know that we should be checking for added sugars in pretty much anything processed that we are buying. So that is, so that's really B12.
Ariel, I have a question.
Sure.
So you said like look out for inflammatory oils. So what are some of the oils that people should be looking out for?
Like things like, like things like vegetable oil and canola oil, and anything that has like, if you see trans fat, there's anything in there that's something that like we don't need, obviously, right? Most foods don't even have trans fat anymore, but if there's anything that does have trans fat, there's usually an inflammatory oil in there. But the reason I say vegetable oil and canola oil, and I'm not saying people at home shouldn't cook with those, because you're probably using small amounts, but when you're seeing those oils used in processed foods, they're using a lot of it. And there's plenty of foods and there's plenty of brands that don't use those, that use olive oil. Avocado oil has become more popular too. Excuse me. So it's definitely not necessary, and there are a ton of options that that are without those inflammatory oils. Okay, so oftentimes vegan vegetarian diets require supplementation with vitamin B12. And yes, this is true. So as I mentioned, always check with a medical doctor or a registered dietitian. Even with a registered dietitian, always check with your medical doctor. But this used to be more true, as I've mentioned. I think a lot of food distributors are trying to fortify with vitamin B12, and that's been very, very helpful. But it is important, somebody who does follow specifically more a vegan diet, that vitamin B12s are checked and are monitored, because vitamin 12 is super important, and we should be going to doctors. We should be making sure that those B12 levels in our blood are sufficient, because if they're not, we may need supplementation. Some people even get injection supplementation of B12. it lasts longer, and I think it fills up those stores a lot quicker. So, so that's definitely, that's definitely an option as well. But it's just an important thing to know for anybody who does follow, a vegan or a vegetarian diet, that, B12, iron for sure is important, but B12 can be very dangerous if we, have low stores of that. So, so just, it's something to be mindful of.
We do have another question here, Ariel.
Mhm.
So it says, what are some examples of milk supplements?
Milk supplements. Did I say that somewhere?
I don't know. Could, if you ask this question,
Do they mean milk alternatives?
maybe.
Well, if they mean milk alternatives, it's, almond milk, soy milk, oat milk, pea milk, PEA, and things of like that sort. But I don't know if if that's what your question was.
And then there's one more question for you. How often should we check our blood to see what vitamins are deficient?
I say we should be having yearly checkups, and that's a personal and professional opinion. And at any yearly checkup, your doctor should be taking bloods to see, what levels are at, what our vitamin levels are at, and any other minerals that they're going to be checking, but they're mostly checking for vitamin levels. Like in the hospital, in a hospital setting, let's say, right? Pretty much any time blood is taken, levels are being checked for vitamins. So, but like for somebody who's not in a hospital setting, obviously we don't have to get our blood taken every day. But once a year, at a routine checkup, that should be, that's definitely enough. Okay, so here's a lentil stew recipe. So 1.5 cups of dried lentils. So onions, some celery, garlic, tomatoes, carrots. You can use some broth. You can use water instead of broth. You can make your own broth. And then a teaspoon of, or half a teaspoon of, of any type of spice that you like. Right here, I did cumin, thyme, and paprika, but some people may not be big fans of those. So whatever it is that they want. And the idea is to really just like let it sit, let the lentils soften, let them kind of congeal, come together, let all the flavors come together. It's really, really delicious. As I mentioned, it's super hearty. Cooking with lentils is super hearty. It's, very, I hate to use the term meaty, but it is. It's hearty, it's meaty, it's delicious, it's filling, it's comforting. And it's a really, really great option for people who follow a vegan or vegetarian diet, who are kind of looking for a really rich iron source, but something also that's very filling and and has protein and everything of that sort. So this is a great recipe. Again, feel free to use whatever spices you want, because it should be, like I said, lentils kind of go with whatever flavor profile you're going for. So that should be up to you. And I think that's really it. Do we have any other questions, or does anybody have any questions, anything that they want to say?
Anybody?
We had some good questions though.
Yeah, we had a lot of good questions.
Yeah. So thank you guys all for coming. And Michelle, thank you for moderating and for I think something just came in.
You're getting lots of happy comments. Great webinar.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. And thank you, Michelle, for being here and for moderating. And again, everybody should really check out Michelle's Instagram. She's awesome. And really, everyone, thank you. Feel free to email me with questions. You can email me at info@fairmeals.org, but also my name, Arielle, at fairmeals.org. check out our website. This webinar will be up there. Our past webinars are up there as well. And, you know, listen out for any future webinars that we have coming up. We have coming up next month. And yeah, thank you guys all for being here.
Thank you guys. It was so nice to
Thanks.
chat with you. Very, very informative. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Michelle. I appreciate it.